Hi guys, hope you're doing well. This is my season 2 review of Breaking Bad. Apologies it's taken so long. It was just finding time to rewatch season 2 and get myself, refresh my memory a bit and also write down some notes, which I did do during my lunch break today at work, which is all good. Let's get into it. Oh, yeah, by the way, full spoilers for season 2. If you've not seen season 2 of Breaking Bad, do not watch this video. Go watch season 2, then come back. Good? Good. Right, so season 2 of Breaking Bad is, firstly, it's the season where they start to find their footing more with the tone they're going for. This season's a lot darker, a lot more intense. It still has a lot of the dark comedic elements of season 1, but it's definitely going more for a serious tone. We're not quite there yet. I think it gets to season 3 where they finally solidify the tone they're going for. But yeah, this one definitely feels a lot darker. And also, this is the season where they start to give more characters like their own arcs and their own stories and their own journeys they're going on. Because in season 1, it kind of feels like, oh, Walt is the focus. He's the main character. He's your focal point, and everyone else is just a side character. It's either a ally or an enemy or someone who gets in his way or someone he has to take out. Something like that. But in this one, they go, oh no. Walt is still he's still the focus point, but we're going to give the other characters their own little arcs that they go on, which I absolutely love. So we start season 2 right where season 1 left off, which is Tuco beating his own man to death for nothing, Jesse and Walt standing in the desert like, so what do we do now? And which leads to them getting paranoid and thinking, we have to kill Tuco. Well, Jesse's like, we have to kill Tuco, and Walt's like, no, we can't. And Jesse's like, we need to shoot him, we need to kill him with a gun. And Walt kind of comes up with this idea of, well, if we have to kill him, let's make this thing called ricin. Now, ricin is going to be very important throughout this whole show, so pay attention. Unfortunately, Tuco gets to them before they can get to him. He kidnaps Walt and Jesse, takes them out into the desert, where we meet Hector, or as Tuco calls him, Uncle Tio. He's this guy in a wheelchair who doesn't seem very compos mentis, just sits there, kind of very out of it, rings a bell a lot, just fucking sits in front of the TV, just ding, 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 And Tuco got this idea of, I'm going to take you boys down to Mexico. My cousin's going to come and pick us up, and we're going to go and cook meth down there, which leads to Walt and Jesse being like, we need to get out of this situation. What do we do? And because they try and put the ricin in Tuco's food, but Hector is obviously a lot more aware than they realise, so he warns Tuco by dinging the bell. Tuco's about to waste Walt and Jesse, but they get the upper hand, and then Hank shows up just at the right time, because obviously Walt's been kidnapped, so they put out missing person posters, because Skyler's like, oh my god, Walt's been taken, what the fuck, where's he gone? But Hank shows up just in time. He manages to waste Tuco, and Walt and Jesse manage to get out before Hank sees them. And that's where this season starts. Also, apparently, the idea was that Raymond Cruz, who plays Tuco, was meant to be in the show a lot more, but I think he had commitments to another project. So they could have went, oh fuck, we need to quickly write him out. So that's why he was written out that quickly in season 2. So, we start with Walt in this season. Now, Walt very much, this is where he starts to turn his lies into an art form. Because obviously he has to come up with a good excuse for why he disappeared, was kidnapped. So he comes up with this lie of, oh yeah, it was a fugue state. I think it was because of all the medication I was taking, and I don't remember the last few days. It's all very fuzzy. And the doctors are kind of like, yeah, that's not really a thing, but we need to obviously look into this, so we'll schedule. Oh, don't mind the wind. We've got an absolute gale blowing through at the moment. So they schedule therapy for him. Well, they think, oh, he's clearly losing his mind. So he has to lie to get out of that. He has to, lie to Skyler, because she's now convinced that he disappeared, and now she thinks he has a second cell phone, and now she thinks that maybe he's having an affair, and he's having to deal with, trying to repair his family and trying to repair his marriage, while also having to deal with the fact that, well, Tuco's now gone, how do we sell this meth? So him and Jesse have to be the Tuco. They have to be the ones that sell the meth on the streets. So Jesse gets his friends involved, and that it seems to be going fine until Skinny Pete, Jesse's friend, gets jacked by these two meth heads, and they steal his stuff. And Walt kind of has to, take charge and be like, no, you have to get this stuff back. So take this gun, go and get our stuff back. We need people to be scared of us. So, and there's also, you go more into grey matter with Walt, because Gretchen comes back, and you remember Gretchen and Elliot from Grey Matter? She turns up at the house, and, Skylar's thanking her for paying for Walt's treatment, even though she's not paying for the treatment. Walt's paying for it with meth money. So there's this great scene. Admittedly, it's an uncomfortable scene, where Walt and Gretchen meet up at this restaurant, where you find out a bit more about grey matter, where you think to yourself, so why did he leave? Because it's not really gone into in season 1 as to why he left grey matter. Now, he says it's because he accuses Gretchen and Elliot of cutting him out, whereas she says, that can't be how you remember it. You walked away from grey matter. You were packing your bags when you were at my parents' place, and I like the fact that the show doesn't really give you a definitive answer for, was it his pride? Was it his ego? Did he feel inferior towards Gretchen? Because, I think Vince Gilligan has somewhat alluded that that's the reason why Walt leaves grey matter, because he shows up. This is when Walt and Gretchen were an item. He turns up at her place, and she clearly comes for money, where of course he doesn't, and he felt inferior. But you don't actually get to know whether maybe Gretchen and Elliot were trying to push him out. Maybe because Gretchen and Elliot suddenly became more of an item. You never know whether Elliot stole Gretchen from him, or maybe they were having an affair behind Walt's back. You don't know. Maybe they were trying to edge him out, but you never really get a definitive answer. Anyway, so let's go to Jesse. Now, Jesse, very much, I would say he goes through the most in this season. He starts off with having to deal with the aftermath of Tuco, having to deal with the fact that his parents have now booted him out of his house. So there's like a little montage where he's homeless. He's trying to find a place to live. He's trying to connect with old buddies and try and move in somewhere. There's even a point where he has to sneak into the lot where the RV's being kept, and he has to sleep in there. And you're just like, oh my God, man, you really have been through the ringer here. But to be fair, halfway through the season, he does find a place. He does actually find somewhere to live properly, which is where he meets Jane, played by Kristen Ritter, who I haven't seen her in a lot, but when I do see her, she's always a standout. So you think, oh, things are on the up and up. They start bonding, they start dating, they sort of become a bit of an item, which is great because, we only want the best for Jesse. This is also the season when we find out that Jesse, amongst his being a bit of a fuck up and a burnout and being, he does have a really good heart, I mean, like I said earlier, the episode where Walt forces Jesse to go and get their stuff back from these two meth heads, he goes there with a gun, holds them at gunpoint, and then realises they have a kid. They have this poor kid who is just in all these dirty clothes and, clearly in a horribly fucked up environment. So, Jesse's trying to get their stuff back, but also trying to keep the kid occupied and keep the kid entertained while these two scummy people are just at each other's throats all the time, which leads to the woman basically crushing her husband's head with the ATM machine. And she's just so completely out of it. She doesn't know really what's going on. So Jesse uses that opportunity to take the money from the ATM and take the kid outside and kind of wraps him in a blanket and says, lets the police find him. He says, "You have a good life, kid." And that's when you realise, oh, they're giving Jesse a real kind of noble kind of character arc here, where you realise, oh no, he is a good guy at heart and he's very protective of kids, and I love that. But that does lead to, obviously, the story that this guy had his head crushed by the ATM machine, and everyone thinks that Jesse was the one who did it. And Walt finds this out and is told by Jesse's friends that, like, oh yeah, everyone's now scared of us. Usually we're having to chase people down for money, but everyone's paying up because, of this story that's spread. And Walt's kind of like, I like this. I like this. I like this feeling of power. I like this feeling of intimidation, and it's great. So yeah, Jesse's having to deal with the aftermath of that, dealing with his relationship with Jane, which does kind of, they seem to take him up. They seem to think, oh, he's getting better, and then they smack him in the face. And the smack in the face is that he starts doing heroin, because Jane is actually a recovering addict as well, but she's a heroin addict. And Jesse's never done heroin before. And the way they visualize it when he does heroin for the first time, where he's just laying on the bed, and you get this great shot of, it looks like he's being pulled up to the ceiling, where he's just kind of in this state of euphoria, and he's just like, oh my God, great visuals. Sorry, I keep leaning forward like that so you can't see me. So yeah, but this also does show how easily manipulated Jesse is. I mean, you do get it a lot, mainly with Walt as the series goes on, but Jesse's very much, as much as he does talk a big game and he does think he's the boss, he gets very easy manipulated by people. And in this season, I feel like, yeah, he gets manipulated by Walt, but also gets manipulated by Jane, and we'll get into that later on in the season. So yeah, stay tuned. So now let's deal with Hank. Now Hank, I would say, I really love what they do with Hank from this season onward. In season 1, he was the alpha male. He was like the DEA agent. He was the guy who was always busting Walt's balls, really. He was always the kind of like the cocky, almost kind of arrogant dude. But that all changes when he kills Tuco. Now, I don't think that they actually tell you if Hank has actually had to kill someone before. I don't think they mention it. But he kills Tuco. He's now this big hero of the DEA. They even give him like Tuco's gold grills as like a souvenir. They put it in like a little glass container. And you think, yeah, that's cool. And then there's a point where he's about to go out for beers with the guys. He gets into an elevator and he starts having a panic attack. Like he's suffering from like PTSD. And you suddenly go, oh, fuck. Like, we're not used to seeing Hank like this. Like, suddenly being very vulnerable and being very kind of like, this has clearly affected him a lot. And to make things worse, he's given this promotion in El Paso where he's, has to go out and, help the Drug Enforcement Administration over there, which is a great cameo by Danny Trejo, where they're having he's kind of like their snitch over there. So Hank's kind of meat-headed, kind of arrogant, almost like jokey persona doesn't fit in with the group over there. And it leads to Danny Trejo's head being on a tortoise because, as a message to the cartel. Everyone else is laughing off like, what's the matter, Trejo? You never seen a severed human head on a tortoise before? Hank goes into fucking meltdown like, oh my God, I can't deal with this, PTSD. And which leads to him being shipped back to the States, where he just basically goes on a meltdown, which does lead to one of his biggest insecurities, which was, Walt, the guy who he always kind of, always loved, but always kind of looked down on as like, I'm the alpha male. I'm definitely the more manly of the two. But there's this great little scene where Walt actually has to kind of, give Hank a bit of a pep talk and give Hank kind of a bit of more confidence. I mean, you can tell that Hank is not comfortable with this, because he says, even he says to Walt, he's like, you and me, we don't have an experiential overlap, and Walt says, no, we kind of do. I've been through stuff just as much as you have, And he does give him this great fucking speech where he just says, I used to be scared. I spent 50 years being terrified, but, I used to wake up at 3 a.m. But ever since I got diagnosed with cancer, I sleep absolutely fine. And he basically tells Hank, get out in the real world, get up, kick the bastard in the teeth. And you kind of go, fuck yeah, Walt. And even Hank, to a certain extent, does kind of go, okay, yeah, I appreciate that, absolutely. Now let's get into Skyler. Now, I understand that there are some diehard Skyler haters out there, and it does make me physically sick that Anna Gunn, who plays Skyler, has really had to distance herself from this show purely because of all the hate mail that she got. Not just hatred, like fucking death threats, which is ridiculous. I mean, if you're one of those people who did that, fuck you. Seriously, what is wrong with you? It's the character. You can hate a character, fine, but don't send fucking hate to the actor. That's disgusting. Anyway, we get to Skyler, and this is where I would say in season 2 she's definitely the most petty, because obviously the whole thing with the fugue state where she doesn't believe that at all. There's even an episode where she just grinds on his fucking gears. Like she basically gives him a taste of his own medicine, where she's just like, I'm going out. And he's like, where are you going? She's like, just out. He's like, well, when are you coming back? She's like, I don't know. And just leaves. Which, the first time I watched this, I fucking hated her. I just like, oh my God, that's so annoying. Because the first time you watch it, Walt's your protagonist. He's literally the guy that you're following. Because he's your protagonist, you're on his side. And everyone else who is in his way or annoying him, you immediately hate that character. When I rewatched it, I did understand, no, mate. She's giving you a taste of your own medicine. You need to understand why she's being like this. Is she being a bit petty about it? Yes, but it's completely understandable. But yeah, that's sort of like the whole thing with Skyler in season 2. She's pregnant. She's still pregnant. She's having to deal with all that. But yeah, we'll get more into Skyler later. Now, season 2 is where they start introducing a lot more characters, namely Saul Goodman. Now, I'm going to say something very, very controversial here, but please bear with me, no hate. When Saul is first introduced, when I first saw this show, when he's first introduced, I didn't like him. Not as like I thought he was a bad character, I just didn't like him. I thought he was smarmy, he was slimy, he's a douchebag. I mean, the fact that he starts chatting shit to Hank, particularly like after all the shit that Hank's just gone through, I just went, who are you? Fuck you, man. Just coming in here, fucking chatting shit, thinking he knows everything. Don't get me wrong, as the show went on, I loved him. And I love him to this day. I mean, he's close to Walt as maybe my favourite character in this whole universe. But yeah, he is very much, he does kind of take the role of like the comedic relief, and particularly as the show goes on, particularly as we go through like season 3, 4, 5, having him there to just crack a joke or give some levity to this show is really, really welcome. But yeah, Bob Odenkirk, man. I love Saul. He's a great addition to this show, and the fact that he's clever enough and he's slimy enough to weasel his way out of. I mean, there's literally a scene where Walt and Jesse are threatening Saul. They got a gun to his head and they put an open grave in front of him, and then he's just like, he manages to talk his way out of it and go, no, we can come to an understanding here. And they put $1 in his pocket, and he manages to talk them into just taking him on as a lawyer, and basically saying to them, look, whatever you guys are into, I want to be part of this, and I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. And that is where we get introduced to Gus. Oh, Gus Fring, man. So basically, Saul has sat both Walt and Jesse down and goes, "You guys suck at your own distribution. You need someone who, you need a businessman, you need a distributor, a proper guy who can deal in bulk and can do this without being caught and is a proper professional." So they set up this meeting where they're meant to meet this guy, this distributor, and they're sitting at the restaurant Los Pollos Hermanos, and they don't quite know who it is. They don't know who he is. He knows who they are, but they don't know who he is. And they sit there, and Jesse turns up high and kind of like very twitchy and stuff, and and they sit there, and nothing happens. They just kind of sit there, and the guy doesn't show up. So Walt calls Saul back and being like, "Well, the guy didn't show up," and he's like, "Well, he obviously didn't like you." So Walt goes back to the restaurant by himself and kind of sees the manager, who did actually approach them when he was there with Jesse earlier and just said, "Is everything to your satisfaction?" And he's like, yeah, and the guy just walks off. And he sees him there again and goes, "I wonder." And he says to this guy, he says, "Could you sit down, please? I want to talk to you." And he's like, "I don't understand what this is about." And this is, the fact this manager's being very kind of, "I think you're confusing me with someone else, sir." And Walt's like, I don't think I am. And he's very much like, "Oh, can I direct you to our website? If you have a complaint, I suggest you submit it through our email system." And he's being very, very friendly. And then Walt kind of says, the guy who I was told I'd be meeting with is a very careful man. Please give me another chance. I think you should, And the manager's sitting there kind of all being smiley, and then he suddenly goes, "I don't think we're like it all, Mr. White." And you're like, oh, fuck. It is him. And we get introduced to Gus Fring, man, who is going to be a real mainstay in this show. And the fact that what's great about Gus is he is the polar opposite of Tuco. Tuco was unhinged, he was crazy, he was snorting meth all the time. He was just this psychotic fucking animal. Whereas Gus is quiet and calculating and very methodical and polite. And he has that kind of like that two-faced thing where he can be like the friendly, kind of, fast food manager one minute and then suddenly just... Now he's Gus. Now he is this massive meth distributor, and it's great. And also we get introduced to Mike as well, which Mike gets introduced right at the very end of this season, which, fun fact, they wrote the character of Mike because it was meant to be Saul that turned up in that particular scene, but Bob Odenkirk had other commitments. I think he was in How I Met Your Mother. So they just went, oh shit, so let's just write this character of Mike. And literally his first line is, "Saul Goodman sent me." Because you don't actually know, you don't find out about anything about this guy in this season, apart from the fact that, oh, he's a fixer for Saul. Cool. So, with all that being said, let's get to the end of the season. So, by the end of the season, Walt meets with Gus. They do this great fucking deal where he's going to get, some like 1.2 million or something. And Skylar goes into labour just as the deal happens, because of course she does, because Walt has to miss the birth of his daughter to do this fucking deal. So they do the deal, the baby's all born, and it's all good. And you think, great. But Walt also does know that Jesse is now involved in heroin, because that was why Walt had to do the deal himself, because he turned up at Jesse's house and found him just zapped out on his mind on heroin. So he has to basically break in and take the meth and do the deal himself. So Walt is not happy with Jesse. He's literally like, right, okay, so I did the deal without you. You fucked up. You dropped the ball like you always do. Congratulations to you. And Jesse's like, okay, so give me my money. And Walt's like, I'm not giving you your money. You'd be dead within a week if I gave you your money. And this is where Jesse becomes very easily manipulated, because he goes back and spews it all to Jane about, he doesn't give me this money. He's not giving me my half of the money. And he said it's like 600 grand that he's withholding from me. And she's like, what? 600 grand? And that's when she calls Walt and basically says, I know everything about you. Jesse's basically told me everything. Drug dealer, with a brother-in-law in the DEA. I could burn you to the ground unless you give Jesse his money. And Walt's in a bit of a conundrum here of, I don't really have a choice. She's basically blackmailed me to basically, spill the beans about me. So I need to do something. So eventually he relents, goes to Jesse's house, gives him the money. There's even the great line where there's like Jesse says it to Walt in season 1, where Skyler comes to harass Jesse, where he says, "Good job on wearing the pants." And then when Walt goes to the door to give Jesse his money, and it's Jane standing there, and he gives him the money, he looks at him and goes, "Good job wearing the pants." I love that little parallel. So you think, oh fuck, is Jesse gonna just go off with Jane and money? At first I thought, is she gonna rip him off? Is he gonna be zonked out on heroin? Is she gonna make him do, the last batch of heroin, and while he's out, she's gonna take the money and run by the time he wakes up? But anyway, we get this meeting of Walt and Jane's dad, and he doesn't know it's Jane's dad. He goes to this bar, and he sits down, has a drink, kind of contemplating what he's going to do. He's given Jesse his money. Jesse's basically, at this point, as far as Walt's aware, Jesse's out of his life and it's done. But he meets with Jane's father, who again, he doesn't know it's Jane's father. And they start talking about kids, and he says, "I have a daughter." He says, "Oh yeah, I've just have a daughter as well." And they start talking about, he refers to Jesse as his nephew. He doesn't say his name, but, he just says, "I've got this nephew he's a bit of a fuck up, and, I've always tried to tell him I know what's best for him, but he doesn't listen." And Jane's dad says to him, "Never give up on family." And I think that does hit a real nerve with Walt, because I think it's not too much of a cop-out to say that Walt never cared about Jesse, because if he didn't care, he wouldn't have then gone back to Jesse's house and seen them both, him and Jane, just laid out on the bed, needles in their arms pretty much, just completely zonked out on heroin. And he tries to kind of wake Jesse up, it doesn't work, and ends up knocking Jane on her back. And then we get the moment where you just hear, and Walt looks over, and Jane is starting to choke on her vomit, because obviously she's been knocked onto her back, so she's choking. And Walt instinctively goes, "Oh fuck, I've got to save her." And he goes, and then he stops. And you can see it going through his head. You can see the cogs turning of like, wait a minute, why should I save her? This woman threatened to blackmail me. This woman is probably going to get Jesse killed with all this heroin. And he starts and meanwhile, while he's thinking of this, she's still choking out. She's still choking to death. So he's kind of looking around, going, kind of flitting around, don't know what to do. And then he suddenly stops and goes, "Do you know what? If I just let her die, she can't blackmail me anymore, but also, this is going to hurt like a bitch for Jesse, but maybe this will encourage him to get clean." That's what he's telling himself. I think we all know that, oh no, it's because she threatened him, because she threatened to expose him and blackmail him, and he's like, no one fucking blackmails me. And basically, the acting from Bryan Cranston in that scene is just incredible. The way that he kind of looks at her as she's choking and kind of does that kind of Rolodex of emotions, where he's obviously puts his hand like this, and you can see the tears, but then he sort of goes like this, he kind of breathes and almost accepts what he's done. And this was the moment in the show where I went, oh shit, he's not an anti-hero, they're turning him into a villain. And I was like, and I'm so on board for that. The fact that they're going this dark, with this character. I mean, we're only at the end of season 2. We've got so much more to see and do. But yeah, it's great, man. I love the direction they're going through. So, Walt, obviously Jesse is devastated by this. He ends up in a crack house. Walt has to go and save him. Oh, and also the guy who cleans up Jesse's kind of place when Jane dies, that was Mike. Mike basically shows up and basically cleans up everything and says to Jesse, right, Here's what you tell them. You woke up, you found her, that's all you know. The cops may arrive, may not. This isn't a high priority for them. You say nothing. You cover the track marks on your arms. This is clearly a guy who does it professionally. I love the end bit where he goes, and do I need to state the obvious? I was not here. And it's like, yes. So Jesse ends up in this crack den or meth den or whatever. Walt rescues him, takes him to rehab, and we end the season with Jesse with he's going to clean himself up, and Walt kind of gets what he wants. But then we have that one little kicker towards the end where Walt is going in for surgery for his cancer, and Skyler says, did you bring your cell phone with you? And because he's on fucking, anesthetic or, these mind-bending drugs they give you before surgery, he says, which one? And you go, oh no, just as they were ready to, they looked like the marriage was fine and everything was going to be hunky-dory. He says that one thing and she goes, oh, you bastard. So after the surgery, she literally says to him, I want you out of the house. I want you to pack your things and leave. You lied to me about this. You lied to me about that. You never went to visit your mother. She didn't even know you had cancer. I want you out of this house. Bye. And it's just like, oh my God. And to make matters worse, if you guys were... So, there's a lot of foreshadowing in this season. Now, when the season starts, you see a black and white, kind of image of a pink teddy bear floating in a pool. And you see it a couple more times in a couple more episodes. Now, the 4 episodes that they show these black and white things of, kind of inciting like there was some sort of plane crash or some kind of chemical explosion or something, you don't know. The 4 episodes, they are 737 down over ABQ. And you go, ooh, what does that mean? And you're like, oh, it's a plane crash if you put it together before it happens. So, Jane's father, obviously, is devastated by the death of his daughter. He is an air traffic controller. He goes to work. And obviously, he is clearly not up to this because he starts, kind of directing planes, and there's two planes. And Walt just sits in his garden and all he hears is and he looks up and goes, what the fuck? These planes just bang, just crashed into each other. And the death toll is unreal. And the pink teddy bear goes boosh into Walt's pool. And you suddenly go, oh my God, that's what it was alluding to. But yeah, and that's where we end the season. And we're like, fuck, where are we going to go from here? But yeah, so now, usually I would do my favourite episode for each season, but I'm actually going to do something different. I'm going to tell you an episode that for me, upon rewatch, stands out quite a bit. It's not a negative, it's just an episode where even on rewatch, I don't quite get... It's very much a filler episode, do you know what I mean? And it's the episode Over. Now, this episode is directly after the episode 4 Days Out, which I absolutely love. Just going a bit of a tangent here about 4 Days Out. Basically, Walt and Jesse go out into the desert to cook a load of meth. They plan to be out there for several days. They get stuck out there because Jesse, like a dumbass, leaves the keys in the ignition. Excuse me. Which means the battery dies, so they're stuck out there, basically running out of supplies, and they're both just kind of like, I don't want to do this anymore. And Walt has a brainwave and goes, we need to build a new battery. And basically the whole reason they're doing this cook is because Walt is convinced his cancer's getting worse and his scans are going to come back really bad and he needs to make as much money as he can before he goes. So they go out into the desert, cook all this batch, and they end up stuck in this situation. So Walt has to bring his scientific genius to the forefront and build a new battery, which they end up doing, and they get out of this situation. I love that episode, 4 Days Out, because it's just a two-hander, mainly a two-hander between Walt and Jesse, and I love it. When it's the Walt and Jesse show, that's when it's That's when this show is at its best. So, we get to the end of the episode 4 days out, and Walt going into, the scans, basically, thinking that it's going to be bad. Turns out, not bad at all. He's actually in remission. His tumour has now shrunk by 80%, which of course his family are ecstatic by. They're crying, going, oh my God, this is wonderful, wonderful. And Walt then goes to the bathroom to kind of, just go to the bathroom, and then punches the fuck out of a towel dispenser. And the first time I saw it, I went, well, why did you do that? That means you don't have to cook meth anymore. You're fine. And to this day, I still don't quite know why he did it. Maybe because he kind of thought, well, if I go to my death and they find out my lies, at least I'll be gone, so I won't have to keep up these lies. But now that it's like, oh no, I'm sticking around for a lot longer, so I'm going to have to keep the charade going. I'm going to have to keep up all the lies. That's what I figured. So, sorry, went on a complete tangent. The episode over. Now, this one, I never quite understood, what this episode was supposed to be. Because it does feel like a filler episode. Because Walt has found out his cancer's in remission, and he kind of figures, oh, well, we'll just sell what we've got, and I guess I'm done. So, to be fair, it does have a good scene in it where they're having a party to celebrate the fact that Walt's in remission, and it leads to this very, very intense scene between Walt, Hank, and Walt Jr., where they're all drinking tequila. Walt's basically forcing his son to drink because he's just like, no, this is my house, this is my bottle, my house, I'll do what I want. And leads into a bit of confrontation with Hank, where he kind of tries to square up to him and kind of being like, this is my son, my bottle, my house, But then we get on to the rest of the episode where Walt has this fixation with the water heater in his house, and it just feels like, I just spent the whole episode going, where are we going with this? And he fixes the water heater, and then he finds out there's rot underneath in the crawl space, and he starts focusing on that. And it just kind of feels like, where are we going? It just felt the whole episode was like, what are we doing? It just feels like we're trying to kill time until Walt gets back into the meth business. He's like, he becomes obsessed with the rot underneath the house. And even Skyler's like, are you going to go to work today? And he's like, but there's rot. It's just like, and you're like, what the hell's going on? And you also have a bit of a side storyline with Jesse and Jane. Obviously, this is before Jane, bites it, where, she's obviously trying to keep her relationship with Jesse a secret, because whenever her dad comes round, she just treats him like he's a normal tenant. And Jesse's like, what the hell? I thought we meant something to each other. And she's just kind of like, well, you thought wrong. But by the end of it, they make up and it's all fine. So they're dealing with that. Walt's still dealing with this rot underneath the house. And there's this scene, it kind of ends with this scene where, he goes to a hardware store and sees that there's another trolley with this guy who's clearly buying stuff to cook meth, because Walt recognises the ingredients and starts giving him pointers like, don't buy it all here, buy it in different stores. You wouldn't want that, don't use that. And the guy freaks out and runs. And that's where Walt kind of snaps back into Heisenberg mode, where he basically puts down the stuff he was going to buy, goes out to the guy who was clearly, buying stuff to start up a meth lab, or, and goes up to the guy's boss and looks at him and just goes, stay out of my territory. And that kind of reignites Walt to kind of get back into the meth business, because now he's like, oh, no, I don't want competition. I don't want anyone else selling on my territory. But it was just kind of weird that we had to have a whole filler episode of him being in remission and dealing with like little pet projects at home to get to that point. I don't know. Man, what do you guys think in the comment section? Let me know if there's an episode, if you think that's the same about that. Let me start again. Let me know in the comment section if you feel the same about that episode, or maybe you think to yourself, oh no, it's actually to do with this, and this is why they did it. So, yeah, perfect. So, thank you very much, guys. Sorry I kind of rambled a bit. Again, I do have notes. I am trying to be a lot more structured with my reviews. But yeah, that is my Season 2 review of Breaking Bad. Thank you so much for putting up with me for the last 40-odd minutes. But yeah, if you like what you saw, give us a like, share this video. And if you want to see more from us, subscribe. Thank you guys. See you on the next one.